So, Sean, what did you think of Godzilla Raids Again?
Particularly this Criterion version, and they are not, by the way, sponsoring me or this podcast in any way, but I was particularly impressed with the Criterion version of the film. They did a good job cleaning up the actual footage. I don't know if they went back to the negatives and restored it from there, or if they just found a pretty clean earlier version, but they definitely have some good footage. Like I said, they did a great job with the subtitles. They're accurate as far as my kind of middling Japanese goes. I could tell that they were at least being fairly faithful to it. And like I said, I was particularly impressed with how they actually subtitled the song lyrics, which is very unusual, but I thought that was interesting, even though you didn't particularly care for it.
Well, I liked it in the one scene. I didn't like it at the bar, because it was just kind of like the one line they translated, and then we get to the character dialogue, and
we never hear
that kind
more
of
the song.
Weird.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah. What were your thoughts on the film?
Well, when I reached out to you about doing this episode, I was kind of surprised to hear that you said that you always really liked this one as a Godzilla movie, because I didn't remember much about it. I kind of thought it was one of the weaker entries, or weaker as in not necessarily one of the worst, because it gets pretty bad with a lot of the 60s and 70s ones, but even the really bad ones are oftentimes very entertaining. Once we get Jet Jaguar, all that stuff, like that stuff's just wonderful schlock. And this isn't that. This is so I kind of remembered this sort of being like a middle ground between schlock Godzilla and like the original, like ultra serious. Mm-hmm, yeah. It's a lot closer to the original in tone than I remembered it. It's a better movie than I remembered it. It's just better done. There's a lot of impressive work with the effects. Some new kind of trickery in delivering those effects, but even just the models themselves. The models look probably just as good as they did in the original. I mentioned the costume, for the most part, I think looks worse, or at least is shot worse, and it's shot in a less convincing way. But yeah, I liked this movie. I think the biggest things for me are the no real attention to characters until the second half is a missed opportunity. Especially like looking back, the original, I wouldn't call that a character-driven movie by any means, but it's very well written from a character perspective, at least.
Right.
And then I think the other one, too, is that the movie peaks too early. The Godzilla Anguirus Osaka Castle fight is the best scene of the movie, and I would have liked that.
Right, it would work better as a climax rather than kind of fairly. Exactly. I think even before the halfway point of the film is when we get
it's right around the halfway point. It's 40. Well, it's 35. This is like an hour 20-minute movie. It's kind of a short movie, so maybe about 40 minutes in or so.
Right.
Yeah, I think those are kind of the missed opportunities. I also think, this movie isn't as serious. There's not as much meaningful message in this movie as in the original. I think of because we get a similar scene here that we do to the original, where after that Anguirus fight, we see a little bit of the devastation of Osaka, but we don't really see people suffering, and that to me is one of the standouts of the original, when you see like these just buildings that have just been converted to become hospitals, and you see these like crying children. And then the scene with the crying or the singing children in the church, it's like that stuff is like just devastating. It like rips your heart out in a way that nothing in this movie approaches that.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
But I do think most of the negative things I have to say are comparing it to an original that is a masterpiece. I think on this movie's own terms, it is pretty good. It's pretty entertaining. I don't think it's great, but I liked it.